Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of Shoving Wilco, a podcast dedicated to the music of Wilco. I'm your host, Todd Rossnagel, and it's great to have you along for the ride. I am once again joined by my good friend, Tim Arnold. Tim, welcome back to another episode of Shoving Wilco.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
In our last episode, we briefly unpacked why we love Wilco so much, and we shared our favorite tracks, if you will, the all-timers from nearly 30 years of Wilco music. In our next 4 episodes, we're going to break down the albums themselves, the discography, if you will, of Wilco. We've decided the best way to tackle the 12 Wilco albums, and we do realize they've recorded more, but for our purposes, we're sticking with the main 12, and we're going to divide them up by 3. 3 is a solid number, a trinity of sorts. And so this is going to mean that each of the next 4 episodes, we're going to break down 3 albums. Think of it as a football game, 4 quarters. And we hope, of course, that we're going to have an overtime, a double overtime for Wilco. Tim, your thoughts on the division as we tackle the music of Wilco in 3s?
Well, we've long had conversations about, the timeline, as it were, the growth and change over time and how different albums kind of go together in movements and how, the feel shifts and innovations and desires for new sounds change in a band. And yeah, I agree. I had mine a little less balanced than straight 3s, but looking at it that way, it fits. I think there are sort of triples in these albums and how they're collected.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying, breaking things down. 1, No Mermaid Avenue, which I've mentioned before, was kind of my return to Wilco. I'd heard them and liked them and then fell in love with Mermaid Avenue and went back. And also, you're telling me I can't pick Just a Kid from the SpongeBob soundtrack as like one of my favorite all-time songs?
Yeah, we talked about that in the last episode. It's going to be missing as we break down the albums because it's technically not on an album. Good point. Quarter 1, which is this episode, I'm calling the early years, the formative years. That's going to be AM, Being There, and Summer Teeth. And then the second quarter, I think I can confidently call those the golden years. Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, A Ghost is Born, Sky Blue Sky. I mean, that's just some good stuff.
Top
there.
Of the mountain, right?
That's right. Third quarter, kind of referring to this as the shift, Wilco, the album, The Whole Love, and Star Wars. And then the fourth quarter, the retro years, Schmilko, Ode to Joy, and of course, Cruel Country. So there you have it, Tim. And I think you agree with me that the second quarter is just something. But we got to get there first. We got to get there.
Well, I think that's where if Jeff is listening, he's rolling his eyes at this, right? It's downhill from here, right? And no, it just sort of changes. And you didn't put names on them, but I'd go ahead and say that third quarter, Wilco, the album, Whole Love, and Star Wars really weighs in heavy with the Pat Sansone influence.
Oh, absolutely.
And then to me, maybe even derogatory, I jokingly call that last quarter Jeff Tweedy and the Wilcos.
You have opinions. And we're going to get to the fourth quarter.
Sure,
we're going to get there. But for this episode, we're going to cover AM, Being There, and Summer Teeth. And I thought the way we could do this, Tim, is we could break down each album in the following fashion. There's a social trend for sports fans out there. Start, bench, cut. For each album, we'll list the tracks we'd start. Those would be our favorite go-to songs, our Mount Rushmore song, if you will, of that album. Bench will be for the bench players, a song that maybe doesn't get quite the attention that we think it deserves, but we like it a lot, a song that can, jump off the bench and give you 10 points and a few boards. And then we're going to cut a song that in retrospect we think the band maybe should have just left off the album, or maybe a song that just didn't resonate with us at the time. Your thoughts on that?
No, I think it's a great way to break it down. It's fun for the kids. I think maybe Wilco's looking to up their TikTok presence.
Yeah, maybe we should have a TikTok channel for Shoving Wilco. We'll see. All right, so let's start with AM. First, a little background on AM. Released in 1995, 96, somewhere in that area. Recorded in Memphis, Tennessee. Rolling Stone gave the album 3.5 stars and said this is Wilco's no-frills recipe for heartfelt country and Western rock is most satisfying. But not everyone was high on this album. A lot of comparisons back in the day to Son Volt, which ironically formed as Wilco was recording AM. I think I have that timeline right. Trace was released soon after. We're not going to get into the Wilco Son Volt comparison because this is a podcast about Wilco, but that's just a little bit more about what was happening at the time. And I think some of that Tupelo influence was evident on this album. And you know, Jeff was just coming into his own as a songwriter.
I think especially on AM, it's impossible to completely divorce it from Tupelo and the Son Volt comparisons. I mean, this is a very popular band that splits into two bands. And you can see, you know, the history of it is that Jeff was kind of the bass player. And as Tupelo went on, sort of stepped out front a little bit more. And you can see in AM how he's striding ahead away from Tupelo and into himself. And, you know, AM really, I mean, it is a Wilco album. It's not like it's sort of pre anything they went into later, but, you know, it is, you can feel it coming out of Tupelo.
The top 3 tracks on AM, according to Apple Music: Casino Queen, Box Full of Letters, Passenger Side. And we'll see if any of those make our list. So I'll start, Tim, with AM. My starter is not one of the top 3 commercially successful songs, though Box is really, really close. So fun live when they play that. But my starter is Shouldn't Be Ashamed. Now, this is not going to be a surprise, as I think you know that I love crunchy Wilco a lot.
Yeah.
In fact, one reviewer said Shouldn't Be Ashamed had a Neil Young-like sonic bite.
Oh, absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's probably the edgiest of the tracks on AM. And this is also Jeff's first stab at writing about fear and insecurity, which, as we know, is going to be a major theme going forward. So Shouldn't Be Ashamed. That's my starter. The crunchy guitar at about 1:20 into this song. Just absolutely love it. Still listen to it today. My bench is, it's just that simple.
2, 2, 3.
Go John Sterrett. Plus, they recently played this live in New Orleans, and it was just beautiful. And I think this is a little underrated because of John's overall influence in the band and his connection to Wilco. So that's going to be my bench. And then some want to cut -7, but I kind of like that song. I like it a lot, actually. I'll cut the song that Jeff says he doesn't really care for on this album, or at least I think I read that somewhere. I Thought I Held You. Kind of don't like cutting a banjo song because, I mean, they could have done so much more. And I love the banjo, but
I Thought I Held You. I mean, AM is mostly a rocker, but I Thought I Held You really turns it, you know, it really slows things down, and some of these themes you're getting to, vulnerability and things, it's great. I like that song.
I don't think you even understand.
Give me your list.
Yeah, look, I gotta go with Casino Queen. It's just the best song on there. Strong beat, great fun, incredible story. What, he gets married during the whole thing? You know, my wife that I just met.
Yeah, my wife that I just met, she's looking like a wreck. Casino Queen.
Love that song. The I Must Be High is a great fun song, especially when you're in your 20s and 30s and imbibe at a concert, which, Used to happen with some people, maybe, but the crowd
it was
loves
the first. Yeah, it was the first Wilco song that we were exposed to because it was the
That's
first
right.
song on the CD.
And to me, it's important that it comes out. You know, Jeff and these guys really seem to be. They know whose shoulders they're standing on when they're making these records. They wear their Lennon McCartney on a sleeve, you know, and like you said, shouldn't be ashamed, just drips Neil Young and all these things. As I was listening back to him, maybe for the first time, I felt like that little drum fill at the top might as well have been the snare crack from Bob Dylan's Rolling Stone. You know, it's a pronouncement just right at the top. I Must Be High was my close second, but Casino Queen is my starter, hands down. The bench one for me, it could have been Box Full of Letters. I love that song. It's clearly a breakup song. Some have said, I believe I've read, that it's actually a breakup with Jay Farrar that he's talking about. You know, I got some of your old records.
Yeah.
So that's a fun one too. But for me, the bench that's not the issue. It's such a singular sound on the record. It's an unconventional kind of country rollicker, big, high energy. I love that song.
Yeah.
To me, it was hard to cut one of them. Even Dash 7 kind of drips slow and whatever, but it has its thing. It has its pacing.
Yeah.
To me, and it's a retrospective cut. Wilco got really kind of retroflective for a while in 2007 and started playing a lot of old stuff they hadn't played in a while. And I heard them play Too Far Apart at the Greek, and it just rocked. The tempo was a little bit faster. The intention was a little harder, you know, heavier. And it became a fun party song. And now when I listen to it on the album, it's just slow. It just doesn't have the same feel. So I got to cut Too Far Apart.
And that brings up a really key aspect to Wilco. There are songs that on some of their albums just hit different when you're in the live setting. I mean, that's true for all bands, but it's really true for Wilco.
Well, and I think sometimes it's because they've played it a million times. And maybe on a tour, they're like, look, the kids want to hear it, but I don't want to play it. We got to find a way to make this thing fun. And if you see them live over and over or whatever, you can tell where they've done something new. Just like I said about Too Far Apart. Every now and then you'll get something different in a live performance, and it changes the song for you.
1995, 96, where were you?
I was kind of moving to Los Angeles, January 96. I left New Orleans for LA, and my roommate had a double CD of Being There. That was my first exposure to Wilco.
Yeah, that's
Los
right.
Angeles.
You had to kind of go back in time to get AM into your system.
Yeah, that's right. And Being There didn't even stick with me. I liked it. That's cool. It was a couple of years later. Maybe Mermaid Avenue was new. That was 98. That sounds about right. And our friend Chad was playing it. I think his intro was Billy Bragg into that sort of duet album, collaborative album. And Hoodoo Voodoo just rang my bell. And I was like, what is this? He's like, this is Wilco and Billy Bragg. I was like, oh, I've heard of Wilco. And I went back into Being There and AM. And probably by that time, Summer Teeth was already out. Who knows?
Yeah, AM hit for me. I was in college and was working in television news at the time. I was a senior at University of New Orleans. And, it was a great album. I enjoyed the songs, but nothing, as I've described in the last episode, Being There is where everything changed for me. So I remember hearing this, but it didn't really jump into my being, if you will, when I first heard it. So let's move now to Being There. We're released in 1996, I believe, a double album. And if you remember, Tim, it was sold as a single album price. which for 25-year-old Todd was a big deal. Rolling Stone gave it 4 stars. Pitchfork said Being There was the 88th best album of the 90s, and there were a lot of great albums in the 90s. So I'm impressed it was on the list.
You think the band has that big number 88 up on their wall? 88.
There you go. There you go. All Music said it was, quote, a near perfect record. And Rolling Stone's David Frick praising the album's rich and rootsy musicality. And the top 3 songs of Being There, according to Apple Music: Out of Sight, Far, Far Away, and of course, Misunderstood. And that is, if I were to choose a song on this album, my starter, it's got to be Misunderstood. It is the Michael Jordan of starters. This is the Michael Jordan of Wilco songs. It's the song that changed everything for me, and I talked about this in the last episode. It's been described as the alpha and omega of Wilco songs. And I want to quote American Songwriter here, because they said this about Misunderstood, and I think it's just fantastic. They said it best sums up the Wilco ethos, and it created the inroads for the band's later sonic and emotional triumphs. Before the stunning accomplishments of Summer Teeth and Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, there was this song to make you believe in the power of this band. And if you were listening right, it was all about you. It's hard to describe just exactly what I love about this song. There's so much, but I think for me, what I really want to get across to the listener here is how this song starts. It's the contrast between this song, again, the start of the next Wilco album. The first cut on the album is Misunderstood. So the start of this new album compared to the sound of their previous offering, AM, that contrast was stark and it was beautiful. It was visceral. And it made me sit up in my chair and wonder aloud, what am I listening to? And that is where the love affair with Wilco began. So, Misunderstood has to be my starter.
Back in your old neighborhood.
So that is my starter for Being There. Tim, what's your starter?
Yeah, I got to say, I put Misunderstood, and then I knew that you were going to say it, so I wanted to change it up. But I have to agree with you. There is just something special about this song. Its arrangement, its slow, grumbling build. It's amazing. And we keep going back and forth to live. You just can't separate the two. The band is so great live. If anyone is listening to this, they're interested enough, you have to go see them live. And you'll know what Todd means about Misunderstood when you do. So I went in another direction, and I almost went so far as to pick Someday Soon. It may be the most country song that Wilco's ever recorded.
Yeah.
But I had to go with the instant listen of Monday. It's just such a rocker. It's so much fun. And it's a recurring thread that some bands do. Not everybody does, but I love when bands sing about being in a band, and this is one of them.
Yeah, that's solid. That's a solid song. There's no doubt about it. And again, it's a fun song, right?
That's right.
It's a song that, if you were going to play this album for someone and said, what is Wilco all about? And this is the album that you have to play for someone. I don't know that you would start with Misunderstood. Monday might be a good intro.
Yeah, I think you're right. And also, if you're ever on a road trip and driving to where the sun is coming through that driver's side window on your left arm, you how can you not think of that lyric?
With the left arm tail. He said, Monday, I'm all right. Get me out of FLA. School, yeah, I fooled ya. Now
All right, let's move to our bench, an underrated song. I Got You. This song is right behind Misunderstood in my journey. And I'll add, listening to this song recently in lossless quality is worth the trip. I Got You. Live, when I Got You comes up, I mean, Pat's windmill on the guitar when this is played, I mean, as absolute top shelf live moment for me.
Yeah, an encore for the ages. They play that one as an encore plenty because they know the feels.
It's hard to call this one a bench.
Yeah, I had it as my bench too, though. You know, there's so many starters. I mean, where do the lines get drawn? My bench is maybe a unique pick on it, but I love Dreamer in My Dreams. It's just rowdy and wild and even falls apart until somebody decides they're not done playing. You know, I just love it. And I wonder if the title's not a throwback to Waylon Jennings' album, Dreaming My Dreams. You know, like we're talking about, the mythos that this band is steeped in. They love playing it. They love proclaiming it. They love joking about it. How can you not name drop Waylon Jennings?
So we have to cut someone or something, some song. And I'm going to cut In Your Dreams. It just didn't do anything for me in 1996. And it still doesn't. You know, Jeff doesn't sound right in the song. So I'll cut In Your Dreams.
I like In Your Dreams. And I know what you mean. I think you've said it before. Jeff sounds drunk. And who knows, maybe he was. But even if he's just kind of playing at it, for me, it's so loose and it's just different. You know, it's just falling apart, you know, like the guy singing.
Was I in your dreams? I'd like to know that I touch your hand and did.
So I'll save that song. I'm gonna cut Out of Mind, Out of Sight. It's fun that they put this alt.
Whoa.
No. You think I'm talking Out of Sight, Out of Mind? I'm not. They have two versions of the same song on this record, and it's fun to hear the difference. I think when the album first hit me, I was all for it. But then after a while, it's just not as good as the other song, and I'd just always rather hear Out of Sight, Out of Mind.
I like
So I'm going to cut Out of Mind, Out of Sight.
That brings us now to Summer Teeth, the final third of the first quarter, 1999, 3 years after Being There was released. And the album, of course, Summer Teeth. We get a departure of sorts, Tim, sound-wise, from Being There. Some say this was Wilco's first and maybe only venture into pop, but I use that word very, very loosely. There was a Beatles-esque sound production to this album.
Yeah, this is the one where Jay Bennett really steps in and sort of puts his influence on. The story of this record is, you know, Jeff learning Pro Tools from Jay and really learning how to play with sound, play with the studio. Like the Beatles sort of turned the studio into their instrument after they stopped recording live, performing live, and got masterpieces like Sgt. Pepper and things. That's what they were doing here. And it's worth saying that this is what followed their collaboration with Billy Bragg doing Woody Guthrie's songs on Mermaid Avenue. I think they just grew a lot as songwriters. They grew a lot in comfort with the studio and the utility of the studio. And yeah, but don't forget, pop is short for popular. You know, right. There's a lot to be said about, you know, the pop music of the 60s and 70s that these guys grew up listening to. And yeah, I think they leaned into that a lot on this record.
Jay's influence on this album, this is the precursor to, of course, Yankee, which is going to be next. And so you can start to hear, and of course we didn't know it at the time when we were listening to it, but you can start to hear some of that experimentation. And it brings me back to a comment that you had in episode 1, which is one of the comments that's really stood the test of time for me when it comes to Wilco. It's how I've come to almost describe them now. And that is that, they take a song like a bag of ice and they throw it on the ground and they recreate the song. And you can start to hear some of that experimentation with Summer Teeth.
Yeah, I agree. It seems to be that they found ways to, write a nice little song and then go, now what can we do with it?
Like a cloud, his fingers explode.
And there's so much great, fun, unique, sound crafting. Songwriting even sounds short. There was a lot of great songwriting on AM and Being There, but they were very much straight ahead, country twinged rock and roll. This is something different.
It is something different. The top songs from Summer Teeth: A Shot in the Arm, Via Chicago, I'm Always in Love. 3 phenomenal songs. So, Tim, I'll let you go start with your starter from Summer Teeth.
Yeah, I wanted to go with Via Chicago. I love the sort of hometown call out, a band based in Chicago to speak of it. They have a lot of great, strange poetry in there, which you start to really see come out from Jeff here.
I dreamed about killing you again last night, and it felt all right to me.
But re-listening to the track, it's really, again, the live performances, how they changed it there, and some of that kitchen sink cacophony in that song just changes everything about it. So I'm not starting Via Chicago. I'm starting Every Little Thing. ELT is just the straight rocker of this song. It gets me every time. I'm cutting the grass with headphones on and I'm screaming the harmonies out in this one. Every Little Thing is my go-to track on Summer Teeth.
It's a solid song. I have a real hard time starting one song from this album because Via Chicago, as you mentioned, just such a beautiful song. Always in Love. I just absolutely love Always in Love. But I'm going to go with A Shot in the Arm. And mainly because, they're for a variety of different reasons. First of all, I just absolutely love the song. It was the song they played at Austin City Limits Hall of Fame ceremony that my wife and I recently went to. So I love that. And I love the theology of A Shot in the Arm. And I know that saying there's theology in this song is a little bit of a stretch, but those of you who know me, everything's theological in my world. The line, something in my veins bloodier than blood. There's a lot to that, Tim. A lot to that line. I think of communion, and we don't have time to unpack it today. I mean, maybe, hopefully, in a future episode, we can unpack this song a bit more. But, I mean, what you once were isn't what you want to be anymore. I mean, that is just absolutely beautiful. So that's my starter, A Shot in the Arm.
It's a great song. I was just relieved to learn, at least I think, at first I had this grim aversion to it, that it was maybe a heroin reference.
Yeah, he's looking for love. He's looking for love.
So I'm glad that, I hope that it's not. I'm glad to take the theological route.
Well, as you know, and again, you referenced if Jeff is listening, Jeff has always said that there's a reason for some of the lyrics, there's a reason for some of the storytelling that's done on the album, but he really does truly lean into what do you see, what do you hear in this song, and he gives the audience permission for their own interpretation.
As Trey said, you were up all night.
Well, Jeff's frequently talked about his method of songwriting being sort of starting with the sounds of words, you know, not necessarily a tale to be told in song lyric format. He has a more technical songwriting term for it. I've forgotten what it is, but he just sort of spits out words that have the rhythm and the tonality and the rhyming and the whatever that he wants. And then as the song's created, he slowly forges poetry out of it. And I think that's why beautifully sometimes the songs make no sense. So of course Jeff's saying like, well, you tell me what it means to you, because some of them may not mean anything to him, you know, storyteller wise.
Yeah.
And
right,
this record has a bunch of that good stuff in it.
All right, so who's off your bench on this album? I mean,
Man,
it's hard to grab somebody off the bench because they all seem like starters. But who's your bench?
Yeah, I went chronologically, and I struggled with AM, and I struggled a little bit more with Being There. And then when I got to Summerteeth, I thought this is a stacked bench. I mean, I could have picked any number of songs. She's a Jar is a beauty. So weird, sweeping, lyrical. And maybe the first time that I really heard John Stewart as a genius bass player. So I'd probably say She's a Jar, but it'd be so easy to say Summerteeth. The title track is nearly the perfect Wilco song, the classic pop rock sound with just strange poetry in it. It's one of those songs that really drew me in early.
I'm going with Can't Stand It, you know, strictly for the experimental version. The what's going on with that song. I'm going with Can't Stand It because I think it's an underrated song. I love that song.
What a way to start the record out too.
All right, so who are you cutting?
For me, I'm going to cut We're Just Friends. It's a nice, sweet, sad sax sentiment. I've totally been there and probably cried along with that song. But listening to its entirety, if I had to lose one, I'll cut We're Just Friends.
Can I cut the album cover?
You can. It's a weird one. I had to dive in and do some homework. Folklore says it's not a man in the moon. It's actually a girl blowing bubblegum, which makes quite the statement about bubblegum pop. This is where they were going with this record.
Yeah, I just, you know, that album cover is, I think, the worst. But you know, it's weird that it's the worst, and then we have, you know, such great songs. But anyways, I digress. I guess I'm gonna have to cut Candy Floss. Sounds out of place now with its poppy sound. Some say it kind of has that kind of like an Elvis Costello feel. But it feels like
but
it has
remember what
what
Elvis Costello was doing at the time of 70s, you know, post disco and punk. He was going back to that 60s pop sound of, you know, like Dave Clark 5 and the rest of them. Like, there's something to be said about Wilco stepping into this mantle of playing some 60s pop. And I want to mention, well, for one, Candy Floss is a British term for cotton candy. I didn't know that for the longest time. I just thought it was another one of Jeff's made up words. But the fun thing is that it comes at the end of the record, and it comes in this time period where these secret songs were kind of popular. Do you remember that? So you'd put an album on, or even a cassette, anything linear at the time, and you know, in a future age would be the last song on the album cover. And then there's a long gap of nothing. And if you leave it playing, if someone's still listening, boom, a bonus song shows up. And it's like mystery and fun. Then you get into the advent of CDs, and track number 15 on Summerteeth is actually called 23 Seconds of Silence.
Yeah. And there was a part of me that wanted to cut that. But yeah, I mean, I hear you. I hear you. It's it's a decent song, but for me, it just doesn't hold up to the Giants on this album. So if I have to cut something, I'm going to cut Candy Floss.
Todd, will allow it.
In fact, we are going to play Candy Floss on our way out of this episode as this concludes the first quarter of Wilco's discography. If you return for the next episode, we are going to get into the golden years, 3 of the most fantastic albums ever produced by Wilco. Your preview, if you will, of the next episode, Tim.
My preview, I got challenged recently by a friend that said I like record company Wilco instead of independent Wilco. And I'd say I challenged that's not true, but I didn't really know why, and I had to sit on it. And thinking about it and connecting some dots on some other things, it hit me. You know what I like? I like Jim O'Rourke Wilco.
There you go.
Jim O'Rourke produced these next 3 records, or was part of these next 3 records. And If you don't know it, go check out Loose Fur. It's a fantastic side project with Jeff Glencochi and Jim O'Rourke.
We are back with the next episode of Shoving Wilco, where we are going to talk about Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, A Ghost is Born, and Sky Blue Sky. Thanks again, Tim, for joining us, and we'll see everyone on the next episode.